It is coming in the Biden administration and the lawmakers are in Congress, and they have to make a big decision this month. Something big will happen this year, everybody, and this month for our stimulus payments. But first, let's get into the most important news first. Student loan payments are resuming this year, and it's good news for pretty much everybody. In March 2020, the former president implemented the first student loan payment pause to give borrowers some financial relief. And since then, Biden extended it multiple times. He in November pushed to extend the relief through 60 days after June 30th, and the most recent extension is very likely to be the final one. Even the Education Secretary has told lawmakers that in early May, we are going to resume payments for 60 days after, but no later than June 30th. We're going to begin that process. He also stated we are confident that the Supreme Court will rule in favor of the targeted debt relief. This targeted debt relief should help people get the stimulus checks, because it will provide millions of dollars in relief to borrowers, and they want to make sure that information that borrowers are getting is accurate. Biden also agreed to codify the end of the student loan payment pause in the debt ceiling deal he reached with Kevin McCarthy. He suggested that the president did not deem any financial aid necessary for borrowers this year. But some economists think that the country should start preparing for the economic strain once again and once the payments resume. The Education Department has already previously estimated the pause just puts about an extra $5 billion back into the borrowers' pockets, giving them more economic freedom not to only buy a car, a house, or other big expenses, but to leave jobs in pursuit of other better opportunities. These positive impacts, everybody, could quickly reverse once the payments resume, because the chief economists have told CNBC that restarting student loan payments after an over 3-year pause would just stunt economic growth and strain consumers' wallets. The economy has made strides in recovery since the beginning of the crisis, and with employment returning to the pre-recession levels, much faster than the 2008 financial crisis, the student loan payment resumption jeopardizes the recovery. Democratic lawmakers have been sounding alarm on the harmful impacts a payment resumption would have without Biden's broad debt relief. Even the Massachusetts representatives have told Insider News that this would absolutely push for a payment pause extension if the Supreme Court were to strike down the student loan forgiveness debt. And Representative O'Connor even wrote on Twitter that resuming student loan payments without providing relief will be devastating for 45 million borrowers. Still, many Republicans have continued to push for borrowers to resume their payments, even before the Supreme Court issues its final decision, because last week the House passed a bill to overturn Biden's debt relief and immediately end the payment pause, and the Senate recently voted to pass the measure. But regardless of when the exact payments resume, borrowers and the aid will likely suffer. The nation's employers stepped up their hiring in May, adding a robust 339,000 jobs, well above expectations and evidence that enduring strength in an economy that the Federal Reserve is desperately trying to cool. Friday's report from the federal government reflected a job market resilience after more than a year of aggressive interest rate hikes by the federal. And many industries, from construction to restaurants and healthcare, are still adding jobs to keep up with the consumer demand. But overall, everybody, we noticed one thing. Stimulus payments are still necessary because people are still suffering from the consequence of inflation. And with inflation being so high, it just makes more sense for stimulus payments to be sent out.
$1,000 or couples making more than $160,000 won't receive a check. Now, according to one estimate, that's 7 million fewer families than in the original bill. Biden gave in to the demands that the relief should be narrowly targeted because he cannot afford to lose a single Democratic vote since no Republicans are expected to back the bill. Hoda and Savannah.
But Krista, how does this affect the timeline then of final passage?
Well, Savannah, look, preliminary votes are going to start today, and it has a good chance of passing both chambers, but only if, and I stress this point, only if there are no other major.
At $80,000, above that, you won't get anything. If you're a married couple that files jointly, you will get $2,800 total. The big change this year is kids. If you have kids of any age, not just under 16, you'll be eligible for $1,400 per.
Sanders took to the Senate floor and pummeled legislation, which the Democratic leaders and Joe Biden agreed to pass in an effort to secure Manchin's vote for the Inflation Reduction Act last month. Winning Manchin's support was crucial for the party to advance a slimmed-down version of Biden's economic agenda. Progressive Democrats have fervently pushed back against the inclusion of the reforms, arguing they gave the oil industry a boost when the country should be investing in renewable energy. The inclusion of permitting changes reflects a disastrous side deal between Manchin and Democratic leadership. Sanders said adding the reforms in our position with the energy policy the U.S. is pursuing should be happening. And when asked about his announcement, Sanders said at a time when climate change is threatening the very existence of our planet, why would anyone be taking or talking about substantially increasing carbon emissions and fossil fuel production? He also warned of a revolt. Bernie Sanders warned of a revolt against House Democrats, saying at least 59 Democratic lawmakers would release a letter stating their opposition to the deal. And Manchin defended his opposition, and his position on this, noting that the Inflation Reduction Act included funding for several kinds of clean energy projects. Still, the senator from West Virginia argued that increased energy production from fossil fuels is needed to address more pressing energy demands. More relief has been approved for low-income households as signed as DI. The IRS released new information on bonus relief checks. Many people are waiting to get an extra payment from the IRS, as long as they meet the new eligibility requirement. The IRS estimates it will refund more than $1 billion in failure to file penalties to around 1 million taxpayers. Most refunds will go by the end of September. The tax agency announced last month that it would give money back to fire taxpayers for failing to pay back their taxes on time during the first 2 years of the crisis. Chuck Reddick announced that the penalty relief issued today is yet another way the agency is supporting people during this time. The IRS said issuing the refunds would also allow the agency to focus its resources on processing backlogged tax returns and taxpayer correspondence ahead of the 2023 tax filing season. Taxpayers who file for or typically charged a penalty of 5% of what they owe a month, up to a maximum of 25% of their unpaid tax bill. According to ABC News, there is no need to contact the IRS to ask for your money back. The IRS says the refunds will be sent automatically. Taxpayers who were issued a late filing fee but never paid it will have to change and charge to remove it. But failure to pay for penalties are not eligible for refund. The IRS has said that the vast majority of refunds will be sent via check, while a percentage of taxpayers will receive their refunds through direct deposit. In order to qualify for a refund of the program, individuals and businesses have to have filed their late 2019 and 2020 tax returns on or before September 30th. The Taxpayer Advocate Service is urging taxpayers to file electronically, and Manchin has also criticized Joe Biden's student forgiveness plan, arguing there are other ways to support student borrowers. Manchin said the plan is excessive. Millions of people are actually eligible to receive a stimulus check that they may have not received. The IRS has announced that some money will be sent out to people very, very soon. And according to the U.S. Department of Treasury, a report that was published showed that almost 645,000 people who were eligible for the third round of stimulus checks had not gotten their payments since mid-September. The American Rescue Plan authorized the federal government to send up to $1,400 for each person who qualified for this check. The money was technically adequate support to get that bill through the evenly divided Senate after winning concessions from Democratic leaders. But in the new letter, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer are asking him not to include the pending reforms championed by Manchin into a stopgap funding bill that measures that Congress is expected to take up this month. Without a stopgap funding measure, lawmakers are ready for the government shutdown on October 1st. The opposition from Democrats is